Susan's heart pounded in her chest as she walked through the deserted streets of the small town of Everwood. The once lively Christmas decorations now seemed like sinister sentinels, casting long, ominous shadows in the cold moonlight. A heavy blanket of snow muffled her footsteps, and the air was so frigid it felt as if the very essence of winter had frozen in place. It was Christmas Eve, and Susan found herself alone after a last-minute work assignment had forced her colleagues to leave town. As she approached her old Victorian house, its ancient timbers groaned against the icy wind. Susan's breath formed frosty clouds as she fumbled for her keys, the eerie silence of the night pressing in on her. Once inside, Susan tried to shake off the feeling of unease. She lit a few candles, their feeble flames flickering in the drafty air. The glow barely penetrated the darkness that clung to the corners of the room, creating an unsettling dance of shadows. Determined to dispel the loneliness that hung in the air, Susan decided to decorate her home for Christmas. As she unpacked boxes of ornaments and lights, a sense of foreboding settled over her. The Christmas tree, once a symbol of joy, now loomed like a spectral entity in the dimly lit room. As she adorned the tree with ornaments, a strange sensation crept over Susan. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Glancing around nervously, she dismissed it as mere paranoia, the result of spending Christmas Eve alone in a creaky old house. As midnight approached, Susan settled into an armchair, wrapping herself in a cozy blanket. The clock on the wall ticked ominously, each chime echoing through the empty house. The glow of the Christmas lights cast a warm yet eerie ambiance, creating a stark contrast to the cold winter night outside. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the room plunged into darkness. Susan's heart raced as she groped for her phone to use its flashlight. Just as she managed to illuminate the room, a low whisper echoed through the air. "Susan?" Startled, she turned in the direction of the voice, but there was no one there. The air grew colder, and Susan felt a chilling breeze sweep through the room. She dismissed it as a draft, but a sense of dread lingered. Summoning her courage, Susan decided to investigate the strange occurrences. She descended into the basement, where the cold seemed to intensify. The flickering light of her flashlight revealed dusty old furniture and forgotten belongings. As she scanned the room, a pair of eyes glowing with an otherworldly light met hers from the shadows. A gasp escaped Susan's lips as a figure materialized, a spectral child dressed in tattered clothes, staring at her with hollow eyes. "Why did you forget, Susan?" the child whispered, its voice carrying an unsettling mixture of innocence and sorrow. I don't know what you mean," stammered Susan, her pulse quickening. "The promise," the ghostly child continued. "You promised to always remember us on Christmas Eve." A flood of memories rushed back to Susan, childhood tales told by her grandmother about the spirits of Christmas past, bound by a promise to be remembered every year. As the last living member of her family, Susan had unwittingly neglected the tradition, and the consequences were now unfolding. As the realization dawned upon her, the basement seemed to come alive with more ghostly apparitions. Forgotten relatives, faces blurred by time, all reaching out to her with accusing gazes. Desperation gripped Susan as she raced back upstairs, the ghostly whispers growing louder. The once familiar walls of her home felt like they were closing in. The Christmas tree lights flickered in erratic patterns, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance to the haunting chorus of the spirits. Determined to make amends, Susan retrieved a dusty family album from the attic. As she flipped through its pages, the faces of her ancestors stared back at her, their eyes filled with reproach. The ghostly child appeared again, its voice now tinged with sadness. "We waited for you, Susan, but you forgot." With a heavy heart, Susan lit a candle and placed it in the center of the room. The flames flickered and danced, casting a warm glow that seemed to appease the restless spirits. The ghostly figures gathered around, their mournful whispers now replaced with a sense of acceptance. But as the candle's flame wavered, Susan felt a sudden chill. The room darkened, and a sinister presence loomed. The spirits' faces contorted into expressions of fear as a malevolent force overshadowed them. A voice, cold and guttural, echoed through the room. "Susan, you cannot undo what has been forgotten. The pact has been broken, and now you must face the consequences." The temperature plummeted, and the flames of the candle extinguished, leaving the room in pitch darkness. Susan's heartbeat thundered in her ears as an unseen force gripped her, pulling her into a void of shadows. When she opened her eyes, Susan found herself in a spectral realm, a twisted version of her own home. The ghostly child stood before her, its eyes now filled with sadness rather than accusation. "You must face the darkness you unleashed," the child whispered. As Susan navigated the ghostly landscape, she encountered twisted versions of her memories, flickers of forgotten promises, moments of neglect, and the echoes of a broken family tradition. Each step weighed heavy on her conscience, and the shadows seemed to feed off her remorse. In the depths of the spectral realm, Susan confronted a shadowy figure, the embodiment of the malevolent force that had taken hold. Its voice reverberated through the void. "You awakened me, Susan. Now you must bear the burden of your forgotten promises." With a menacing roar, the shadow lunged at Susan, enveloping her in a suffocating darkness. She felt the weight of her neglect pressing down on her, threatening to consume her very soul. But then, from the depths of her memories, Susan found a glimmer of resolve. She recalled the warmth of family gatherings, the joy of shared traditions, and the love that transcended time. With newfound strength, she pushed back against the encroaching shadows. The spectral realm quivered as Susan confronted the malevolent force. "I will not let the darkness define me," she declared. The shadows recoiled, and the ghostly child approached, its eyes now gleaming with gratitude. "Thank you, Susan. You have faced the darkness within, and in doing so, you have redeemed us all." As Susan emerged from the spectral realm, she found herself back in her dimly lit living room. The Christmas tree lights twinkled softly, and the spirits of her ancestors watched with serene expressions. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive chill had lifted. In the days that followed, Susan diligently honored the family tradition. She lit a candle every Christmas Eve, recounting the stories of her ancestors and acknowledging their presence. The once lonely house now echoed with the faint laughter of spirits, grateful for the remembrance they had longed for.